We'll have another one or two pop in. Welcome, everyone. This is Joanne May with the Illinois Small Business Development Center for the Metro East at SIUE. And we have the pleasure of Katie Robberson joining us today. She is a faculty member here, and I will let her tell a little bit about herself. She has joined us and our efforts supporting small businesses for a few months now with some CARES Act funding support that we were able to receive during the pandemic. Katie has assisted us with social media and other marketing and communication efforts. So we are honored to have her expertise, and you guys are definitely in for a treat, and I'll let her take it from here.
Oh, well, thank you for selling me that way. Thanks, Joanne. Like she said, my name is Katie Robberson. I teach in our management and marketing department here at SIUE, and I've been here since July of 2012. Prior to that, I spent 11 years in corporate industry, working mostly within the healthcare sector in a few different roles that centered around things like brand management, sales and sales training, and corporate communication. So that's a little bit about me. I would love to know who is here with us today. So if you don't mind just giving me your name and kind of the role you play and the organization you work for, that will help me know who's joining us. And I can either call out people's names or we can just kind of have a free-for-all.
I'll go first. This is Matt Feldman. I own a small consulting practice based in Edwardsville that does work all across the country. We work with K through 12 and universities for data, different types of data services.
Thanks, Matt. Nathan, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Nathan Parchman. I'm a commercial loan officer at Farmers and Merchants National Bank in Lebanon. We're going to be building a branch in O'Fallon. And I also own a rental company, Parchman Properties LLC. And I am an owner of Nitro Family Foods, which is a salsa and pickle business as well.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Dave, it looks like, introduced himself via chat. So Dave is from Lincoln Theater and Abe's Gourmet Popcorn in Belleville. Welcome, Dave. Someone named Aurora, it looks like. If you don't mind telling us a little bit about who you are.
Hi, I'm Aurora. I currently work for a long-term care facility in Caseyville, Illinois, Old Peppermint community. And I've talked with Joanne off and on over the past several years through some different avenues. I've worked for some large and small companies, and I know that the SBDC has a lot of value to add, especially to our smaller companies in the area. So I am looking to see what other resources might be available for my current company that I'm working with. I am the CFO of that company, and I'm also just staying in touch with Joanne from our other avenues of work. I don't know if at some point in time I may help with some webinars from my knowledge base as well.
Awesome, thank you. Carissa. Oh, Carissa can't speak at the moment. Her name is Carissa Hess. She does marketing for a community center, and in addition to that, she is a Disney travel specialist. Full disclosure, I know both Carissa and Matt outside of this setting, so we will do our best to not have any inside jokes in the classroom. Let's see, Laura.
Hello, my name is Laura Wagahoff. I am the agency owner of It's a Small World Adventures, travel agency based out of Sycamore, Illinois. And Carissa actually is one of our newest agents. So she told me about your webinar. So I appreciate being able to learn from you.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Marcy. I don't know if Marcy is able to unmute. We'll see. But I believe Marcy is with the bank, correct, Joanne or Marty?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Did I miss anyone?
I don't think so.
Okay, I don't think so either, but I can't always trust my eyeballs. Okay, so we'll get started today. So it's a two-part training. Today is just going to focus on customer service. And for some of us, it's going to feel very basic. And that's kind of the point. We need to sometimes remind ourselves of the things that we think we know. And we'll spend some time in breakout rooms sharing hard situations, best practices, things that have worked well as it relates to you and your business with the other people in the room. I kind of growing up as a trainer learned that one of the most important things that people took away from trainings was what they learned from each other. So I don't typically spend a lot of time talking at people. I'm a bigger fan of having dialogue. So we'll kind of use that to frame our time together today. So what we'll cover, we'll just talk about customer service, what it is, what's the importance of it. We'll talk a little bit about how do we develop those very basic skills that you would want to use, but that if you manage or oversee people, you would want to make sure that they are using. One of the reasons that this series is titled Competitive Advantage is because one of the biggest competitive advantages you can have over someone else in your industry is your level of customer service. Then we'll kind of move into communication techniques that talk about the way we can use our communication protocols and styles to make sure that we're maintaining the customers that we have. We're keeping them happy, but we're also able to kind of grow and bring in new customers. And then we'll end just kind of looking at a customer first mind frame. On Thursday, we'll get more into kind of the true competitive advantage mindset. So customer service, it's any interaction, right? So this can be a customer that you see outside of your business. That's still considered customer service. It's before, during, after the purchase of your product or service. It is your reputation within a community. It is one way that you can absolutely set yourself apart from the competition. How many of you have paid more or gone out of your way to acquire a product or service because you knew you would get excellent customer service there or by paying more than somewhere else? See a lot of thumbs up in the chat, right? And that happens over and over again. So if our job is to gain customers and keep them loyal, we have to excel in customer service. We know that it helps to keep our customers loyal. So typically when we have a new customer come in, we want to show them excellent customer service, but it doesn't stop with that first interaction. It needs to continue. They don't expect us to be perfect every time. And I think oftentimes when something goes wrong, the way we fix it actually can make a customer more loyal to us. And one example that I use quite a bit is the Tylenol case of the early 80s. Does anybody remember? We were all very young in the early 80s. Maybe some of us weren't even born. But Tylenol was laced with arsenic. After production in the Chicago area, a few people died. Does anybody remember that or have read about it? See one hand, a couple thumbs up. So what Johnson & Johnson did, it is a classic business case. They shut everything down and they said, we owe it to our customers to find this problem and to make it right. And that's a very large scale. They lost billions of dollars. Okay, that's a huge, large scale example, but we see this in our everyday. We went out to a restaurant pre-pandemic, they messed up our order. They went out of their way to make up for it, right? We have these experiences all the time. So there are opportunities, even when something goes wrong, to still extend excellent customer service. That oftentimes for our employees is hard to understand because as an employee, you feel like you've messed up. So if you are the manager or the boss or the owner, you kind of can empower your employees to recognize the opportunity they have in a mistake. So let's start off by talking about the characteristics. What we'll do is I'll talk about a characteristic and then you'll kind of go into a breakout session for a little bit to discuss ways that you put this into practice or concerns that you have within your organization about this particular characteristic. So the first is active listening. If we were all together in the same room, we'd do this really fun hands-on active listening exercise. Can't do that virtually, but what we can do is talk about best practices. So active listening is this idea that you make a very conscious effort to hear and understand what someone is saying. So you're not just hearing their words, you're actually listening for understanding. It is a drastically different process than just hearing. You also want to pay attention to every part of the person communicating. So their nonverbals, is what they say, does it match their nonverbal? Oftentimes we'll see disconnect when someone is upset. When someone is very emotional, we'll see a disconnect between what they say and what their body is telling us. Active listening takes the entire person into account. So you really want to pay attention to everything going on. You also want to let that person know you're listening. So when we go into this breakout in a minute, I'd like for you all to share with each other ways that you make sure someone knows you're listening. So for example, for me, when my students come to visit me, I make a very concerted effort for them to see me put my phone away. I usually put it in a drawer because I want them to understand they have my undivided attention. I also close my laptop. So there are little signals that we can do to let someone know that they're being heard. Providing feedback is another really important part of active listening. We've all heard this before, right? It's when somebody says, what I think I hear you saying is, or this is what I understood, can you elaborate? And then we have to respond appropriately. So have any of you ever said something to an employee or a customer and their response clearly tells you they're not listening? If it hasn't happened to you, I want to know what planet you live on. That is one of the biggest clues to us about active listening, is if the response that we get back is appropriate to the question that we've asked or to the statement that we've made. And communication should always be two ways, and we'll kind of talk about this at the end, but there is just as much responsibility when we're in that listening role as there is when we're in the kind of speaking or disseminating role. Questions at this point? Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna put you in breakouts. We'll probably only spend about 5 minutes because there's not a ton of you. And what I want you to do when you go to this breakout is talk about a couple things. How do you let someone know that you're listening to them? And then what practices have you used either within business or even within personal life that have afforded you the ability to be a good listener? Is it removing distractions? You know, what are your practices that you could share with others? Are we clear on what I want you to discuss? I'm going to give me a thumbs up in the chat. Okay. All righty. Then I will send you into breakouts. I'll give you a warning before I'm going to just like pull you back. I'll give you a 1 minute warning, and then we'll come back and have a large discussion.
Okay, you know that Marcy's in twice.
Yes.
Okay.
I do. So Marcy, Marty, do you know if she's in on a phone and a computer?
Yes.
Okay.
I think she can talk on the phone.
Right. So what I'll do is just make sure that her computer and phone are in the same breakout. That might take me just a second to fix once I send everybody to rooms. All right. So I will send you away and see you back in a few minutes. slow. I think we almost have everyone back. Okay, looks like everybody's back. Just share some general themes, if there were any in your breakout room, about ways you show someone you're listening, and then any kind of best practices that you use.
Are we speaking or are we typing them?
Speaking would be great, if you're willing.
So we talked a little bit about not multitasking while we're doing different things. And in a virtual world, it's a lot harder to abide by. In a in-person meeting, you physically have somebody there with you that it's very obvious if you're multitasking. In a virtual world, it's a lot harder to have that accountability.
Yep, fair. Anyone else? Looks like Dave unmuted.
I was in the group that was talking, so.
Okay, you can share if there's other things to share. There's only 2 groups, so we have time.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. One of the things I talked about was, you know, being a business owner. Most of my interaction now, if it's not directly face-to-face with the customer, most of your interaction with customers is on Facebook Messenger, emails now, as they're asking about products, things that they might have come into the store before and they're not doing it anymore. So it's a little harder to make sure that they know you're listening, right? Because you're doing it all in typing, you know, so you don't get the face-to-face, the nonverbal communication.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good point. We'll actually talk a little bit about that towards the end of today. What are some ways we can kind of overcome the change and shift that we've seen, especially due to the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, there was much more communication that we were doing in a virtual space. Anybody else?
We talked about eye contact and restating what they had said. And one thing that it always, when you're talking to somebody, then they try to tell a story that's better than yours or be like a one-upper. They're not really listening. They're just thinking about what they can talk about. So trying not to match someone's story. I've always noticed that that's really a key to breaking a conversation down very fast, and people are like, you're not listening, you're just thinking about what you're going to say.
Excellent. All righty. Well, thank you all. We're going to kind of do a few more breakouts throughout the day. I find it helpful for people to hear from each other. So you may or may not be with the same group. We'll do them at random, but we will spend more time with each other kind of in smaller groups. Let's move in kind of to some characteristics we can think about. So action, as we all know, speaks volumes to someone. So when we're trying to execute on great customer service, we want to act fast. So don't let your customers feel like you've forgotten about them. Even if you're not done getting all the answers to all the questions, just that response of I'm still working on it can really help someone understand that you are still there. You're still working for them. And then if there's a problem, be quick to resolve that problem. Has anybody ever had a customer service issue that just lingers on and on as a consumer? So not as a business owner, but as a consumer? You can unmute and talk if you want.
I know I definitely have.
Yeah, and so how does that make you feel on the customer side?
Oh, I feel frustrated. In fact, I was just dealing with that yesterday with a payroll company that has just been a nightmare. You sit on hold for 2 hours trying to reach somebody. You finally reach somebody, and they have difficulty trying to understand, let alone help you with what you're trying to get resolved. And
right,
of course, it's payroll related, so it's somewhat time sensitive.
Yes, and I think oftentimes it's a really good reminder for those of us that are running a business to remind ourselves of these instances, right? And so how can we adjust maybe our practices based on our feelings as a consumer? So we want to alleviate and kind of take actions on problems quickly to show that we're listening, that we're being responsive. Nothing is worse than, having an upset customer who feels like they're just waiting. Because in that waiting, they're probably telling 5, 10, 15 people, and now with social media, maybe way more about their experience. So we want to take action as quickly as possible. Being patient with our customers, which sometimes is easier said than done. Exceeding expectations is another great tenet for customer service, and being consistent. So we want to have our customers experience the same level of service or the same quality of product every time they interact with our business. And depending on what type of business you run, this is easier to control or really difficult. So in a service industry, that consistency depends on who's rendering the service, right? So if you have 10 employees and 8 of them are great and 2 of them are right, then we can't be as consistent. And so really kind of holding employees to certain expectations of consistency in quality of either a service or kind of how they deliver the product or how they help someone with the product is really important. I see we have a new member. Martha, if you can, would you unmute and just tell us what organization you're with? Okay, we'll circle back. So any questions on these? So how many of you have employees that you oversee that provide customer service for your business? You can either turn on video and raise your hand, give me a thumbs up. It doesn't, whatever's easiest. Nathan was sideways. That was kind of a cool thing you just did there. Hi, Martha. Okay. Martha, where are you from, if you don't mind sharing?
First Mid-America Credit Union.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. We have lots of banks today. That's good. We'll have similar discussions. So when we are training employees in customer service, or even if we're reminding ourselves, things that are an absolute need is empathy. And empathy is one of those things where if our employees struggle with maintaining their kind of emotional stability, empathy can be really hard. And so you can't teach someone empathy per se, but what you can do is work with them to kind of understand the other party's side of an issue. So responsibility, you are building a team and you want to make sure that those employees feel responsible and committed to the image of your organization. So if you oversee, even if it's one employee, you need to know that they feel responsible to the customer, that they feel responsible to the organization, and how do we go about doing that? So when we go into our next breakout here in a minute, I'd like you to talk about some of your more challenging times with employees as it relates to customer service. And what do we do to kind of help overcome that? Oftentimes, a part of it is this responsibility piece, right? Sometimes our employees don't feel the same level of responsibility to our organization or to our customers that we feel as the owner or the manager. Patience, same thing with empathy, right? It's not a skill that we can necessarily give to someone. I oftentimes wish I could like sprinkle patience on people. Doesn't work that way, but we can build a structure that allows for an employee to bring somebody else in if they're not able to handle a situation, or to kind of take a step back and maybe handle it via email if they have to. Enthusiasm is a part of customer service too. We want our employees to be the face of our organization, and we want our customers to feel happy and supported and positive about our organization, and therefore we need that enthusiasm about their work. And then resilience. This goes back to that very first or second slide where we talked about the idea that oftentimes our best opportunities are in a mistake. And so if we mess up with a customer, the way we show the customer that we are good at customer service and that we care about them and that we're dedicated and loyal to them as a customer of our business is to be resilient. We work with them to find a solution. We keep working until we find one that they're satisfied with. Resilience is a big piece of how we overcome kind of what we might consider a mistake. And oftentimes when we go to kind of those lengths to repair a relationship that maybe was strained, we will get a customer for life. Okay, so really think about how we execute on resilience if there's a mistake that occurs. Okay, so I am going to put you into another breakout. This time I'm going to give you a little bit more time. I'm probably going to look at 7 or 8 minutes. I might pop into a breakout and check in to see if you are done or needing more time. But I want you to think about these 3 questions when you go. How do you hire people with skills needed for excellent customer service? So if you own a small business, right, and it's you and 1 or 2 other people, those 1 or 2 other people are hugely impactful to the success your business has because they represent your organization. And so you want to think about, how do we know someone is a good representative of our organization? Discuss with your fellow breakout room folks if customer service is a part of your training. The majority of places it absolutely is. But sometimes in our smaller businesses, we don't have the staff, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources to really spend a lot of time providing customer service training to our employees because we just need them to hit the ground running. And then any best practices that you have in training or hiring. Do you find that side-by-side training works best, where you bring a new employee in and you have them work with someone that's already established? Is it, you know, do they need a mentor? What are some things that you use to make sure that your employees are really representing your company or organization in the best way possible? So do these 3 questions make sense, what I'm asking you to talk about? Okay, I'm going to put them in chat. Are you all able to see chat in breakout?
I think we lose it.
Huh?
I think we lose it when we go to chat.
You lose the chat. I know you lose the slides.
Not sure.
I will try and add it into your breakout room just because I know that we might not remember these questions. So I'll pop into your chat and add them. So do we want new breakout rooms or we want to keep the ones we had last time? Doesn't matter to me. Y'all give me feedback. Thumbs up, same breakout rooms. No thumbs means we don't care.
We have one that says keep it.
I see one that says keep and one that says thumbs up. So we're going to go back to our rooms, okay? And I will be in there in just a second to add your questions into chat. Ooh. Marty and Joanne, neither one of you are in a breakout right now, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Hello.
My loud and furry coworkers. Sorry.
That's okay.
They're giving you feedback.
Doesn't sound very happy.
Katie, I actually had a client the other day tell me that she didn't think that customer service was so important anymore. That
Oh,
people
Lord.
didn't value it anymore.
That's interesting.
I was stunned.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at Walmart and stuff, I can kind of see her point in a way, but I think for small businesses, it's definitely key.
Right. I think Amazon can get away with some things because of their size, as can Walmart.
Yeah.
But you know, if you follow the rabbit trail far enough with Amazon, you can still get pretty good customer service.
Absolutely. They're actually really pretty good. I shouldn't have used Amazon probably as an example, but I feel like I had bought the wrong size ballet shoes for my daughter and they're like, just keep them. I'm like, what am I going to do with these ballet shoes? And they refunded our money. And I kept the shoes. So we just donated them to the dance studio. But yeah, it was interesting that clearly their profit margin can account for one pair of ballet shoes.
I think that what I've found lately with my personal customer service experience with a company is that when you're having a problem with them, they should not send you the automatic, so were you happy with your service with this other company email? You know?
Right? Like the little MailChimp things that go out without, I'm going to give them a few more minutes because the folks that work in banks, I would imagine, have a fairly formal training process that they go through, at least in the larger ones. But for some folks, this is something they don't often think about because they just don't have the resources.
And it's not just being nice to people.
Right.
It's just not a question of being nice to people.
Right. I grew up in a family business. So my grandfather ran an electronics repair shop and it grew into 5 repair shops. And he was the president of the National Electronic Service Association for a long time. And one of the things he always said was, it starts with knowing somebody's name and it ends with doing a good job for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The dog liked that one too.
He did.
It's true. I mean, lately I've, on occasion you get a little behind on an email or on a response to something and you apologize and, they're like, no need to apologize. You've been amazing every other time. So don't worry about it. And I think that does help because if you are responsive, if you do a good job, once in a while, if something does fall off, they're more forgiving.
Right. Yep. And, one thing I try to remind my students is we have to be willing to show our own mistakes. Mistakes happen. And, I really encourage them to own it. I do this weird thing that all my faculty friends think is crazy, but I give them each a mistake every semester. I say, you get one. I'm only going to give you one because I know you only need one, but own it. If you miss a quiz, come and say, this is my mistake. I want to make it up, because they have to learn that failing is going to happen. And we've for so long taught them there's only one right way. I worry that when they get out there, they're not going to understand that part of learning is messy,
Yeah. And I think you learn more from your mistakes than any other way, really.
I certainly learn more all the time by my mistakes, I would say.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to bring them back. I did not expect to see Matt. That's so funny. Is he pretty active with SBDC, I would guess?
Yeah, for a few months now.
Mhm. My oldest two kiddos are the same age as his youngest two kids. So, hi, Martha.
Hello.
I'm sorry you all get my profile for most of the time, but I have my slides in front of me and I have my faces this way. And so I have to look over here to see all of you, and I would much rather see all of you than me. So you get my profile a lot of the day.
Yeah. Sorry, I joined in late too. But
Oh, you're okay. Things, no big deal. Things happen. I appreciate everybody like forgoing lunch to hang out with me. So that's kind of nice. Okay, so tell me a little bit about question one. How do you go about hiring somebody? How do you know that they're going to have good customer service skills? Is it something we can know?
We didn't specifically bring this up in our breakout group, but I don't think it's necessarily something you will know. Like there's no way to know going into a working relationship with somebody if they're just absolutely going to be perfect. I've trained a lot of people and hired a lot of people and worked with a lot of people. And most of the time, you know, it's been a lot of years I've had experience with it now. So most of the time I get it right. But we just had somebody just a couple weeks ago who on paper was fantastic. Her first in-person interview was fantastic. It came time for her to do the job and it just was not the same level that we thought we were going to see. And there's no guarantees.
Interviews are a horrible predictor of performance. Like we know that via research, like it's a fact. So do you all use probationary periods or things like that that allow you some leeway to make sure they're a good fit? Now I realize some of you work on a very small scale, so that might not make any sense. But for those of you in larger organizations, even with a few employees, do you kind of give them a 30-day free trial in a way?
Katie, I work for the credit union, but then my husband and I also own a small business. And in both of them, we have like a 90-day probationary period. Yeah. Because it seems like it takes that long to, 30 days is almost too short. You're still kind of in the honeymoon phase. And then, once they really start settling into the job and, you're putting, releasing them to do more on their own, that I think is when you can really see if it's going to work or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was kind of kidding about the 30 days. I don't know that I've ever seen less than 90, and I've seen as long as 120 to kind of give people that opportunity to get in. And like you said, let's really see. Are there certain questions we can ask, though, that might give us some indication of their ability to handle customers?
Examples of certain situations, how they've handled different situations.
Yep. So asking for tangible examples is vitally important in kind of that weeding out process. So what about training? Tell me what you all do for training.
I see nobody wants to jump in and I feel like I'm not waiting long enough and I talk too much all the time. So I try to give myself more time before I jump in. But anyway.
You can jump in. I don't like silence.
So anyway, my current company that I'm with, our training program is not a formal one, but we're working to make it be formal. Our current training program definitely leaves some things to be desired. What we're working toward is a training program that I had at a different company I worked for before, where it was very formal. It was depending on the job that somebody was in and how long it might take to learn the particular items for that job. It might have gone something along the lines of the very first day the employee comes in and they just shadow whoever they're going to be working with. So they don't actually do any work the whole first day. They're watching somebody else work and taking notes on what they're supposed to be doing and getting acclimated. The next day on the job, they might be doing a little bit of the work with somebody still helping them. The next day on the job, they would be doing the work with their trainer, watching them and correcting any kind of issues that are maybe going astray from what they should be working on. And then the fourth day, as long as they are catching on, doing everything that they need to be doing for that particular position, they're basically working on their own with their trainer, just checking in with them from time to time, and then maybe following up if there's any other corrections that need to happen. And that training schedule gets expanded or reduced depending on the tasks the person's responsible for and how long they take. So certain positions, you might not need to sit all day long for one whole day, depending on what their responsibilities are. So it depends what kind of formal.
Right. No, I think those are all really great points. It's that balance, right, between shadowing and very hands-on and kind of giving some autonomy, and there's that kind of back and forth. Matt in the chat said, he has a very small staff. Matt, are you at 2 or 3 now? If you're still there.
I'm still here. We have, well, if you count our grad assistant, we have 6. We have a grad assistant, professional or a business manager, but then we have 3, including myself, I guess 4 of our professional staff. And so, our view, and we just recently hired somebody. We go into the meetings together. She learns quickly. That's how it's been working. And I like to say, as I put in the chat, I find good people, I put them in a place to succeed and get out of their way. And that seems to be a good recipe, at least for the small sample size I've seen so far. But I'm a little bit different than some of the other people on the call, whereas I pretty much know the people for years before they come to work with me, because I've seen them and interacted with them in professional associations, and I'm careful about who I recruit, because we're a very kind of specialized niche operation anyway.
Right. Well, and I think you bring up a good point that oftentimes we find our best employees through people that we know, or relationships that we've built, or associations that we're a part of, or these groups like this where small business owners get together and share information. There are ways to kind of quote unquote weed out folks that might cause us trouble as it relates to customer service. So all of you brought up really good points. Anything best practice wise that you shared in your breakout? Okay. All right. Go ahead.
One thing my husband does for his small business is he sends out surveys. It's a construction related company, so they're going into people's homes. So he always gives the homeowner a survey to fill out. And part of that, is very specific about the employees. And then he tries to reward his employees when they get really positive things, and kind of selects one every month. And and he only has 6 employees. So it's a small business. And but that has seemed to work out well, and offer them give them some motivation for just doing those little extra things.
Right. No, that's a great tool, getting that feedback from the actual end user, right? So, what is happening when I'm not there to oversee? Because that's really, that feedback is more valuable to us than anything that we might witness, right? Because if we're the boss, they're going to be great in front of us. It's more about what happens when they're away from us. All right, we're going to move into the part of the presentation that deals with communication. And so when we talk about communication, we're going to talk kind of in broad terms at first, all modes and modalities, but we will spend a little bit of time kind of talking more specifically about some of the things that were brought up earlier. Tone is one of those things that's very important, but hard to really execute on for some individuals. Right? Because in a written message, tone does not exist, right? There's no font that says I'm happy. I guess there could be. There is a font that says I'm angry, right? What is that?
All caps.
All caps, right? So we really want to help our employees understand that you have to consider your tone when you're sending an email, when you're responding to a Facebook message. I forgot, was that Dave that brought up the amount of business that you're doing now through Facebook Messenger? Dave, was that you, or did I make that up? I may have made it up. Somebody said it. I just remember who it was.
That was Dave.
That was Dave. Okay. I didn't make it up. Yay. I'm going to give myself a gold star. I remembered that. So, we have to be cognizant of tone because most of our communication methods have become very casual. Email was very formal in the beginning when it first started. Now it's almost conversational. We don't even put greetings and we don't sign them. And it's almost like text sometimes. Facebook Messenger is very much the same. Our reputation as an organization, as an individual, is present wherever we communicate, whatever method, whatever mode. If you are dealing with somebody that is hard of hearing, so if you deal with kind of the elderly population sometimes in your business, if you have anyone where English is not their native language, it's important to know that you should slow your rate of speech. So I talk pretty fast. I have to be fairly cognizant of when I need to slow my rate, but it is one way that can help anybody that is not a native English speaker or is hard of hearing. So for those of you that work in banks, I imagine that happens to you all quite a bit, where you're either dealing with someone that's hard of hearing, and you're not always going to know, right? So we don't always want to assume, but it's important to think about, okay, am I reading in their nonverbals that they're not understanding me, and why? Because one of the biggest tenets of good customer service is excellent communication. So if they're having trouble understanding you, they're going to leave your door and think, why did I even bother? Make eye contact that's culturally appropriate. So depending on who you're talking to, the example I always give very early, like my very first job out of graduate school, I was a pharmaceutical rep for Johnson & Johnson. I called on Saudi Arabian physicians often. Saudi Arabian men are not allowed to talk to women. So I had to talk to or detail the doctor through a door. So there are certain things about different cultures that we may or may not know. So my point here is ask the questions, right? If you can tell that someone is uncomfortable with the way you're communicating with them, there's probably a very good reason, and train your employees to do the same, right? Really understand what it is about how we communicate that someone wants. Do they prefer email? Do they prefer phone? Do they prefer text anymore? Most people under the age of about 40 are going to tell you they prefer a text message. What is it that will help you reach your consumer where they are? During the business week, emails should be responded to within 24 hours. While you are on breakout, Joanne and I and Marty were talking about how sometimes if you provide really good customer service, if you miss that 24-hour window, you might get a pass, right? But by and large, you need to be responsive to those emails. Voicemails should be responded to by the end of business. And if it comes after business, it should be within the first hour of opening. And that can put a strain on your staff, especially if you have a small staff or if you've had a lot of messages. So you really want to kind of carve some time out for that to happen, because that is the action of communication, right? In the world of virtual communication, so much of it can be one way. And one way is not supportive to good customer service. If someone constantly feels like they're asking questions or they're sending information and they're not getting a response, you've likely lost a customer. All right, so I think this is our last breakout. It might be our second to last breakout, but what I want you to do here, and I'm going to give you a little bit more time in this one, probably about 10 minutes, because I have a feeling that we can come up with long lists. I will put this in the chat since everyone can see it. But what I want you to talk about are your pet peeves. And I want you to talk about them from your vantage point as a consumer. Because my goal is that if you can recognize what bugs you and the people in your room as a consumer, maybe those are some of the practices you can start to overcome as it relates to providing excellent communication as part of your customer service. So let me type this into chat. Questions for me at this point? I'm Sorry if you can hear my typing. Okay, so you all should be able to see that in chat now. I'm going to give you about, maybe not a full 10, maybe about 8, because I want to have time to discuss it large, but really kind of go through that list as a consumer. Okay. Do you hate getting spam emails? That would be an example as a consumer that is a pet peeve of mine. Like, I don't read them. I just delete them. And the more I get, the more it bothers me, right? So that's the sort of thinking that I want you to do. So I will send you out and see you in about 8-ish minutes. So Marty and Joanne, on Thursday, do you want me to do like more information dumping, or is this kind of like small group discussion okay? I was torn about what to do, so I haven't finished Thursday yet because I wanted input.
I don't know. I think it's up to the participants. You might ask them.
Okay. I prefer it this way because I think it's good for them to hear from each other and not just me. But if they want information dump, I can do that too.
Yeah, I think this is good. And if we keep it to, 7 or 8 people, maybe we have one of the breakouts in the larger group instead of smaller breakout sessions. I
Yeah,
don't
and
think it really matters.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of do that with this one. I find that people really enjoy talking about their pet peeves. So we'll be able to have a very robust discussion, I have a feeling. Yeah, I didn't realize Matt and Carissa would be in here. That's a little odd sometimes.
It's always fun when suddenly you've got somebody that you know in it.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me too much anymore. It probably would have bothered me a few years ago, back when I first, well, I guess when I worked as a trainer, you were training a lot of peers anyway, but it was just kind of an expectation. Now I get so used to just seeing undergraduate faces that it always throws me for a loop.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give them their 2-minute warning real quick.
Have you dropped in on any of them to see if they're actually speaking to each other?
I did earlier, but then they all stopped talking. I was like, I'm not going to go in this time. I want them to actually talk to each other. It was fun. It was total silence the first time I went in there. And I said, you don't need to listen to me. I'm just here to say hi. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they kept talking. So they've had some good stuff come out. So I trust that they're probably chatting. Maybe not all of them, but I think some of them.
It'll be interesting to hear their pet peeves.
I know this is always one of my favorite discussions.
I don't know that I have a lot of them. I have a couple. But
I think it depends for me on kind of what's the audience, you know?
mhm. Well, I know one of mine is there's some industries that I think should not have a phone answering tree kind of thing where you have to click 1 or click 2 or click 3 or whatever, like doctor's offices. It should be a human.
I don't disagree with that. Righty, bring them back. They must still be chatting. Oh, there we go. Hey, Martha.
Hey.
Katie, I'd love for you to respond to Aurora will come back. She hasn't been back yet, but I wanted to ask her about this too. But about use of like email newsletters, that platform, it seems like maybe that's almost, to me, it seems like that may have passed its prime at this point, because it feels like it's invasive and it's overwhelming. But I'm just curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think it depends on frequency and content, you know? In my mind, if it's weekly, that might be a little much. But if the content is tied to the people it's going to, right? Then I don't think they're out of, like, I wouldn't say they're a bad practice. As long as the content is salient. Now, some of the stuff I get in my inbox is like, why, how did I even get on this list? What survey did I take? What did I sign up for? You know, but if you know who it's going to, as far as your newsletter goes, or you at least have picked a demographic that makes sense, I don't think they're completely out of date. I just don't think that you would want to do them every week, because then they lose kind of their, I don't know, their oomph. They're like, I just remove them from my inbox, honestly. But I'm not, you know, I'm probably a little more, I'm a tough consumer. I'll just put it that way. All right, so share with me, did you want to start with that question, Matt, or?
This was before Aurora came back, and so I was kind of riffing off of something she was saying, and so that's why I put it back to you. But Aurora, what I asked was what Katie's view was on email newsletters and their relevance, and when you use them. And I guess we were going to get kicked out of it. So I probably should have said this before we left the room, but I was kind of reflecting on that, because I feel like I never got into the email newsletters with my clients and potential clients and contacts for my own business for that very reason. And also, in my world, 90% of the new work that I get comes from existing clients. So it's more or less the other kinds of connections that I have with them on a regular basis. But to kind of summarize what I think we said was, one was there's the too much communication piece, but also my reflection was the number of modes of communication, from calls to email to texting to all the new kinds of, every variety of texting, from the Facebook at work to the Facebook Messenger to the Google chats, and then even if you could list all the different ways that we try and communicate by video conference call. There's this Zoom platform we're on right now. We've got the Google Hangouts, and I can't keep up with them all, but it's just what's appropriate for what occasion, and how it changes with different customers and different people you interact with. I think that's my frustration, is just trying to know what the rules are when there appear to be no rules on the way you're supposed to communicate with people, and
Right,
how
or the rules are always changing, right? No, that's very good. Other kind of pet peeves that you all talked about.
I mentioned, especially for texting, the difference in personal communication and professional speaking and texting, that there needs to be even lessons. It's a huge pet peeve of mine. If you talk to me in text shorthand and with emojis and whatever, but we're not friends, if it's a professional thing and you're talking to me about something with the business, that's not how I want it to be perceived. Mm-hmm. Except for Laura, Disney emojis are great for that side of things. That's an exception. But
it's a little bit different when you have a business that you can use emojis with, right?
Right.
Yes. No, I agree that emojis are one of those things that I think we try to use to show tone, right? So we try to use emojis to show tone, and I'm just going to show you my vulnerability. Are you ready for this? You're supposed to share your truth, right? So back probably 5 or 6 years ago, I texted my husband that I was really upset about something, and I put the like frown face, and then the 1-tear face, and then the 2-tear face, because I thought that meant double crying. But no, that means laughing, right?
Oh.
So we have to be very careful with what we do with emojis at all times, because we just don't know. My dad sends me things that in like emoji world slang are probably completely inappropriate, but he doesn't know it, right? So we have to think about what our use of emojis is when it comes to text. So very good point, Carissa, that text message, if it's business related, needs to be pretty professional, not personal. What else did you guys talk about?
I think Dave had mentioned a brief thing at the end of our breakout room that I thought was good. And it actually applies, I'm thinking of it, it applies to what I've experienced with emails and texts as well in the work that I do. If a lot of times when people communicate through all these different avenues, they expect an immediate response. And that is unrealistic with people having functioning lives away from their job. Unless, of course, like if you're an emergency room physician and you've got to be there and you've got to be on call, then yes, you need to answer that right away. Or if you're a 911 operator, yes, answer that right away. That's your, when you're at work on the clock. But when we're all off the clock and away from work, I think I try to have an expectation of the people I deal with as a customer that they have lives away from their jobs. And, if I'm trying to get a hold of somebody at 8 o'clock at night, well, no, they're probably not going to answer the phone at 8 o'clock at night. They have a job. I expect to leave a message. And I've actually been really surprised a few times when I've called someplace expecting to leave a message and reached a live person. And so I don't know, I won't answer a call at 8 o'clock at night unless I know it's something urgently important from my boss or something. And in which case I hope she would only call, which she calls me quite frequently. And we have a different kind of relationship. So it's different. We have friends outside of work. In general, I wouldn't want staff calling me all hours of the day and the night. I wouldn't want to call them all hours in the day and the night. I expect, if there's something to be handled, unless it's an emergency, I'll talk to them about it the next day. Same thing with a client issue. Unless it's emergent, we'll talk about it tomorrow after, well, you know, 8:30 in the morning comes, yes, let's meet, let's talk about it. But
Yes.
let's not do it at 8 o'clock at night.
And
The
Marty,
devil's advocate on that though, like I Facebook messaged somebody last night, it's a real estate agent. I was looking for rental property and he responded at 11:30. He's going to be my real estate agent. I'm working at nearly midnight and he's doing his job too. So that's the way I do. I pick my phone up, I text. So that's how I get commercial loan deals at the bank, is when other people are off work of their real job, they're thinking about other stuff. So I'm picking up deals when no one else is answering the phone.
right. And so it is about, you know, knowing all of this comes down to knowing your audience, right? So if we know our audience, if we know who we're communicating with and how we need to communicate with them and the best way to reach them, then a lot of these issues kind of disappear. But oftentimes we get stuck kind of in this default way of communication, and we don't necessarily consider the audience, right? And that is reversed too, right? Our customers may not consider us when it comes to the way they choose to communicate with us. We do expect very instantaneous feedback. There are some tools within social media and email and even phones and texts where you can set up kind of this, we've received your message, we typically respond within X number of hours or within this day and, you know, within this time frame during a business day. You know, so there are some ways to protect those boundaries. You just have to be sure to set them up. Anything else before we kind of get to the last couple slides here? Okay. So when we're communicating with a broad audience, so if we're pushing out information to customers, we're pushing out information to employees, any type of written message anymore should be pretty short and fairly concise. What we know about the way people interact with written communication now is they're not going to read it if it's more than a couple paragraphs, unless it's important to them, right? And so whatever they need to know needs to go in that first paragraph. In the military, they call it bluff, bottom line up front, right? So everything that we're telling them needs to go early on, because oftentimes we'll lose people. When you go to proofread your work, I am guilty of this, but your voice should be fairly active. And what I mean by that is you don't want to talk in a very passive tone when you're trying to give information. So when you proof work, you can go through and look for words like commitment. Is there a way to take commitment and turn it to commit? Because commit is active, commitment is passive. So MENT or TION words are good kind of indicators to you that, you know what, I need to probably go back and look at this to see if I'm writing in too passive of a voice. And the reason that active voice is important is because we're more likely to take action upon what is being sent to us. So especially when we're communicating with employees, we want to use kind of that active tone. When we're writing or when we're speaking to someone, remember that the average reading level of everybody in the US is what grade? Anybody know? Throw a guess out there.
5th or 6th?
Close.
8.
Fourth.
It's 4th. The average reading level, depending on your clientele. Now, Matt, probably different for you because of your industry and the people that you work with, but your average is 4th. So you want to think about the words you use when you speak and when you write and make them as simple as possible. Your sentences for comprehension, your best bet is between 8 and 19 words. Once we go to 20 words, we're at 50% comprehension. So short, concise, clear messaging. Make sure that you're mirroring. If you're talking to your customer or your employee, match them. Are they a fast talker? Are they a slow talker? Do you need to slow the conversation down because there's a lot of emotion? Really think about using that rate of speech as a tool. And one thing that we know that's actually been studied quite a bit is this questioning and how much allowing someone to ask questions helps to build a relationship between a business and a customer. So don't be afraid for them to ask you questions. You don't have to have the answers, right? I always respect people when they say, I'm not sure, but I know who will know and I will get back to you. Now you have to get back to them, right? Because that goes back to our first message of taking, of acting quickly. But it is okay for them to ask you questions that you don't know the answers to. So we're going to kind of end today on reputation management. And then when we start on Thursday, we'll kind of wrap up a little bit about reputation management and then move on to the next few topics. So reputation management, anybody know what it is? It's kind of a new trendy thing. Trendy as in like 5 years ago trendy. So this is born from digital marketing and social media. People can now communicate with large, was that Marcy raising her hand? I feel like I just stepped on somebody's toes. Okay. It was born from social media, digital marketing, and it is this opportunity for people to just put out information about businesses without any recourse on the business's end, right? People can say really horrible things about you online. Number one, you may never see it. Number two, it may be completely false. It can be shared anywhere. And so reputation management came in and said, we need to be able to counteract this negative that can happen to businesses. So what we'll kind of spend a little bit of time at the very beginning of Thursday talking about is how do we handle it? So if somebody's out there saying things that are not true or that could harm our reputation as a business, what would we do out in that digital space? Has anybody seen this happen to a business on social media?
Yes, I definitely have seen that.
Okay. Is it a business that you'd want to share? Because we could kind of start with that on Thursday. I could build some questions around it.
Well, I mean, I've seen some Yelp reviews of our own place that were before I was with the company that my understanding of the situations they're referring to are completely unrepresented and not accurate. But it's hard to respond to anonymous posts at times if somebody won't come to you directly to even address what it is. And because we're a facility that involves healthcare and residents, we can't disclose the details of a situation to the general public. It just can't be. Now, if we know the individual talking about it and if they have a right and a responsibility to be involved in the situation, then we can say something to them and clarify or go into details with them, but we can't put that out online.
Right. So do you just let it kind of float, or do you have a canned response, or what's the typical response?
Our typical response is to please contact, if it's an anonymous post that somebody's made, we typically say, please contact us directly. We'd like to hear more about your experience. There are additional details that may not be fully represented in what you've heard or something. It depends on what they posted, but depending on how we respond to it.
Yeah.
But usually we don't hear anything back from them. And of course their post is still out there.
Right. And that's part of the challenge. So we'll start Thursday kind of talking about this area because it is a part of competitive advantage, and organizations that can manage reputation well in a digital space are successful. And one of the ways you do it is by at least responding in some capacity. So even if it is to say, please contact us directly, that is better than no response. We'll kind of talk about why and how we can manage reputation in what I think is a very somewhat unfair world for businesses as it relates to social media, because there's no credentialing of what people put out there, right? We could say whatever we want to, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Okay, Matt's just letting us know he's going to be a little late on Thursday, but I'd like you to kind of think about any good examples you have of reputation management issues, either that you've witnessed or that you've experienced as a part of your organization. And we'll start there on Thursday, and then we'll kind of move into some other things. But I've enjoyed having you all. Any questions for me or anything that you would like on Thursday? The one question I do have for you all is, do you prefer this kind of interactive style where you could just spend some time in smaller groups, or would you prefer me to like more information dump? If that makes sense.
I like the breakout sessions. I like hearing from our co-business executives in the area and what's working and not working for them.
Okay. That's what I prefer too. I hate like talking at people. So if everybody is okay with kind of doing this back and forth, we will do it that way. Okay. If there's a specific topic you want to make sure I talk about on Thursday, I'm still kind of tweaking the presentation for Thursday to make sure it's fit for you all. So feel free to either put it in chat, or I guess Marty or Joanne, could they email one of you?
Of course.
Okay. Okay, well, I enjoyed our time. I'll hang out for a little bit in case anyone has questions for me, but otherwise I will see you Thursday at 11:30.
All right. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
No, Laura, I'm saying Laura because I'm used to been doing Zooms. Thanks, Katie. Laura, I'll see her later.
Bye, Carissa.
Thank you.
Thanks.